Welcome to American Indian and Alaska Native Living, a program designed to educate and inspire listeners throughout Indian country. American Indian and Alaska Native Living is hosted by Dr. David DeRose, a board-certified specialist in both internal medicine and preventive medicine. Dr. DeRose has a wide range of experience with Native health issues, and he is here today to help you learn more about your health. Here is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome to American Indian and Alaska Native Living. I'm Dr. David DeRose. It's great to have you joining us for today's show because we've got an amazing program lined up for you. I know it's an amazing program because we're dealing with something that every single one of us deals with, and it seems like every time I talk with someone, anyone, whether they're in Indian country or anywhere else about this subject, they say, boy, I think I could do a bit better in that area. We're talking today about, well, you might call it conflict resolution, but you might just call it playing nice in the sandbox. You might think that's an interesting analogy, but I'll explain to you why I've mentioned it, because I've got a very special guest with me. He's Ron Price. Ron, it's great to have you with us.
Dr. David, it is a privilege to be with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Ron, I started by talking about conflict and about playing nice in your sandbox. Folks that know you, they will say, oh, I know exactly why DeRose is referring to this. But tell us the significance of something that maybe our parents told us when we were children, at least as far as the work that you do with people.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that, David. And on a side note, people ask me, where did you grow up? I always say, I'm trying to do it in Farmington, New Mexico. Okay. Isn't it a shame that we grow up? I don't mind maturing and being an adult, but why do we grow up? We lose our childhood innocence. And most of us can remember the days in the sandbox where we learned lessons about how to get along with others. We couldn't just pick up our toys and storm off, although we all probably, I won't put you on the spot, but I got a hunch you may have done that as I did in the past.
Fair enough, fair enough. You've written a series of books that are entitled Play Nice in Your Sandbox in different venues. Tell us a little bit about the titles of the books. I think that gives us a good overview.
Well, and again, that's just it. That I tried to keep them lighthearted and yet serious, if you can combine those two. But the play in each book is a 4-step model to prevent conflict when you can and should. Notice I didn't say avoid conflict. So often we try to avoid conflict, and that usually makes it worse. You being a medical doctor, you well know what happens when we try to avoid signs and symptoms until maybe it's too late once we get around to it.
Fair enough.
Conflict's the same way. Don't try to avoid it, but there are times you can prevent it from happening in the first place. And the nice is a 4-step model. How do you resolve conflicts that can't or shouldn't be prevented? You need to take them on for the sake of the relationship.
So your books, one that I've got in front of me right now, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. You've got another one, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home, and you even really stuck your neck out and came out with a book called Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Church.
I did.
But is it fair to say each of these books, this Play Nice, like you've alluded to, is like a mnemonic, a memory device where each of the letters in Play Nice refer to some different practice that can prevent or address conflict?
Exactly. There are 3 different P's in each book, 3 different L's, A's, Y's, and so forth. Yes. But I want to comment real quickly. I named the first one At Work because I had a hunch I thought I was going to write 4 books in the series. I think I'm stopping at 3. But I called it At Work just to differentiate. But actually, David, 100% of what I wrote in the Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work applies at home, at church, in civic organizations, at school, anywhere. It's relationship-based, not so much work-based.
So would it even work in a tribal health center or on a tribal council?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And I have presented this information to tribes in my area, and it's been well received.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background before we dive into things that can help my listeners, because folks say, yeah, I mean, today anybody can write a book. In fact, they're scratching their heads. Maybe you just asked some AI program, hey, write me a book on conflict management and put it out there. So this is really your life work for many years. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, how far back do you want to go? I started in Rhode Island. I don't say I grew up there. That's where I started life. But the most important part for this conversation, In 1987, I saw an ad in my local paper, a want ad, and I wasn't looking for a job at the time. I was gainfully employed, happy, content. But the court was starting a new program called custody mediation. And David, I had no idea what that was, but I was compelled. I had to find out. And in essence, if a couple is getting divorced, which we all have either been there or we know people who have, and they have children, it makes no sense to go to a total stranger judge and say, Judge, what should we do with the children? That makes no sense at all. Makes much more sense for the parents to figure out themselves, but divorcing parents are not always able to speak well together, if you understand my meaning there. And so they were ordered into mediation where I or others like me would get them to talk to and with each other instead of at each other, get them to focus on the children, not get caught up in their own situations, and get them to look to the future. How could they make things better, especially for their children and themselves as well? And so I did that for 29 years. David, for 29 years, I put myself between people who were at odds with each other. And if that doesn't tell you I'm a sick man, I don't know what will.
Well, it's good to see you still smiling. For those who don't realize how we conduct these interviews, we actually have a video connection that we're using as we're recording the audio. So obviously you've done something right. You've learned some things along the way. You didn't pull your hair out and actually then throw in the towel. You're still in this field.
Yeah. It was frustrating work, David. I'll admit that. But it was a great joy when people who came into my office, bitter, hostile, adversarial, left, not necessarily best buds. And although some did, they found out they were able to communicate so well, they decided to not get divorced at all. That was really gratifying. But again,
amazing.
If I could lower the temperature, if I could get them to function better together, that was a reward in and of itself.
Okay, so you've got some credibility here. You've been doing this for many years. I know you're still active in the field. Not only are you an author and speaker, seminar presenter, but I think you've got some interesting things in the works. Maybe you should let us know about that before we dive into giving some of this important content.
Well, I have. I've gone more into, I was going to say lecturing, but that's not accurate. Putting on seminars at businesses and churches, schools, wherever. But again, based on the prevent conflict, I call it relationship CPR. So CPR in terms of health and help and so forth, but CPR stands for conflict prevention and resolution. So I equip people to keep small things small. You've heard the expression, that wasn't a hill to die on, and yet we can get caught up on it. I find people getting caught up in situations it wasn't a hill to get sick on, and yet if we're not careful, it can take on a life of its own. So I give some tips to prevent conflict, give some tips to resolve conflict. It's not rocket science, David. Most people say they dread conflict. Oh, I don't want to go anywhere near conflict. Yet we all experience conflict, and most have never been trained or equipped how to manage conflict well. So that's become my life's passion and purpose.
Well, we want to try to give some solid pointers on these topics for my listeners today. We're talking about the book, especially Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. And if you didn't catch Ron's introduction, just because you've read the Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work and have mastered the mnemonic of Play Nice in that book is going to be different. Those letters are going to stand for different strategies in his other two books. But let's walk through the construct that you used in the book that was especially focused on the workplace. I know you've already told us it extends far beyond the workplace, but we're talking prevention first. The word is play, and the word play, each of those letters stands for a different word that's important in preventing conflict, right?
Exactly right. Should we start with the P?
Well, just give us a quick overview. What are the PLAY? What does it stand for?
All right. In the at work, it's push the pause button, list of 10 or create a list of 10, assume good intent. That's a big one. And yield. And David, I'll let you in on a secret. The Y in each book is yield. There are just not a lot of words in the English language, but it's a different focus, a different emphasis on what you're yielding to in each book.
Okay, you gave us the overview. This is all on prevention. Then we're going to talk about dealing with conflict in the nice. So it's play nice.
Right.
This is the mnemonic, the memory device, if you will, the acronym. So play, the P in play, it stands again for what?
Push the pause button.
Help us with that. Why is that important?
I learned this lesson on December 24th, 2008. Now, you'll recognize that right off as Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
David, I went to Walmart for something.
Whoa.
I'm not too bright. I know many of your listeners just turned off the radio right then and there. He's not that bright. I needed something. It was the middle of the day. I'm driving to Walmart, and I got there. That parking lot, David, was the craziest, most busy parking lot I've ever seen in my life. I parked, I think it was a half a mile away from the store. You know I'm exaggerating, but I was way at the other end of the parking lot. And I turned off my vehicle, and I had this internal conversation that went something like this. You are about to go into a building with hundreds, if not thousands, of idiots, jerks, maniacs, people all stressed out and frazzled and experiencing anything but holiday cheer. And I said, you can join them if you want, or you can choose your attitude and not get sucked into that bitterness. And David, that's what I did. I walked into Walmart, and I was right. You could see it on people's faces. They're all upset. And I just started smiling at people. Oh, Merry Christmas. Oh, after you. Oh, let me get that for you. I was Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood. I was Mr. Congeniality. I was really having a great time in Walmart on December 24th, 2008. And when I left that store, I realized that if I hadn't chosen my attitude beforehand, somebody was going to choose it for me. David, we have days that start off bad. We have a fight with a family member, a dust up, some driver on the road was stupid, whatever. We can go to work with a bad attitude, and we can bring that attitude right into the workplace and infect all our coworkers. But why? Why not sit in the car, push the pause button, say, all right, let's regroup here. This day's not off to a good start, but we're at work now. Let's go in and be the best employee this place has ever seen. Ready, break. David, what kind of day are you more likely to have at work? Up, down, or neutral?
If you have that attitude, or just when you walk through the door?
Yeah. No, if you have that attitude.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically setting the deck in your favor, right?
It's not guaranteed, but I sure like your chances. And by the way, there used to be an expression, you don't hear it so much anymore. Don't try this at home. Remember that when we were watching a dangerous stunt on TV?
Right.
Please try this at home. You have bad days at work or whatever your day occupied. When you get home, don't bring a lousy attitude into the home. Just push the pause button. Say, recollect yourself, choose the attitude. And don't tell me we can't do it. We can. Walk into that house with a positive attitude. You're much more likely to enjoy a peaceful, enjoyable evening.
So it sounds like the calls to push the pause button are twofold. One, if you've already had a lot of stress, a lot of stressors confronting you, you're transitioning between venues from work to home or from home to work or vice versa. So that's one place. Another place is where you're anticipating going into a high-risk situation. Am I hearing you right?
You're hearing me perfectly. Thanksgiving's coming up not too far. You have that relative. I'm not saying you specifically, but most of us have that one relative that gets under our skin and on our nerves. We better push the pause button before we go into that family gathering and just decide in advance that whatever they do, whatever they say, we're going to keep our cool. We're going to respond, not react. Reactions are with no thinking whatsoever. Responding is, you know what, they're probably having a bad day. I'm going to go talk to somebody else or whatever. We're not going to lose our cool. If we choose the attitude in advance, it's much more likely to happen. So excellent observation. Thank you.
I'm talking with Ron Price. He's a conflict coach. He's the author of the book, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. Ron, we're breaking down this mnemonic, play nice. We're going to have to step away briefly, but before we do, you've got a host of great resources. You've got books, you've got courses, you do conflict training, conflict prevention, conflict management. How does someone get a hold of you and your resources?
Well, my website is ronprice.com. That's pretty easy, ronprice.com. I can take emails at ron@ronprice.com, ron@ronprice.com. But I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Ron Price Conflict Coach.
Okay, Ron Price Conflict Coach at ronprice.com. We're going to be hearing more from this conflict expert, how you can avoid conflict, how you can deal with it if it occurs. I'm Dr. David DeRose. We've got more coming up on today's edition of American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Stay by. We'll be right back.
Today's broadcast has been pre-recorded. However, if you have questions about today's show or would like further information, please reach out to us on the web at AIANL.org. That stands for American Indian Alaska Native Living. Again, AIANL.org. Or you can call us at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. We'll be right back after this.
We are strong, we are resilient, and we will get through this together. But these are stressful times, and it's important to also practice good self-care. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or afraid. But there is hope. Reach out to someone. Connect with your friends. Stay in touch with your community. And know that you are not alone. Learn more at wearebroadcasters.com/hope. Furnished by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
When Jim died, I wondered if I would be able to keep the farm. Then I heard about the USDA's loan program for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. It's for women and minorities who may be having trouble getting credit. Once I was approved, the USDA's Farm Service Agency helped me get the credit I needed. Now I don't have to sell, and I can pass the farm down to my kids the way Jim's dad passed it down to him. I know he'd like that.
Contact your local USDA Service Center or visit www.fsa.usda.gov.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
You're listening to Dr. David DeRose on American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Your comments and questions are welcome. Call now at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. Here again is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome back to American Indian and Alaska Native Living. I'm Dr. David DeRose. My guest, Ron Price. He is a conflict coach. He is the author of the book Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work, as well as other books that deal with conflict management. Now, you'd like to think if we're doing an interview on conflict management, the guest and his host would not have any conflict. But Ron, you pointed out to me that I've already created some conflict with you. I'm promising my audience you're going to give us some tips to avoid conflict, and you took some issue with that. Tell me about that.
And again, David, I'm not dissing you. It's a common, most people think, the best way to handle conflict is to avoid it. There's two reasons that's not good advice. Number one, you can't do it. Conflict will find you. Anybody who tells you they never have conflict will lie to you about something else as well. We all experience conflict from time to time, so don't try to avoid it. And again, avoiding typically makes it worse. You're not going to take the steps that could resolve the conflict if you're trying to avoid it. So what I advocate is prevent it from happening in the first place. You're not avoiding, you're taking steps to make sure that the conflict never happens. Am I clear on the difference there?
No, I appreciate your point of emphasis. Yeah, some people might say, you can avoid conflict by not having it in the first place, but I hear your point. You say, if you're saying you're using the word avoid, it already exists.
Well, and not only that, if you're just avoiding, it's probably still impacting you and your relationship because you're not addressing it. You're fearful of it. So the issue is still there. At some point, it's going to come up.
Okay. So are we good? Have we resolved this little bit of conflict? We're on the same page?
You're still my friend and my brother. Yes, we are. All right.
Okay. It's mutual. Okay. So with that background, we're not going to tell you how to avoid conflict. We're going to talk about preventing conflict. That's the PLAY. The first P we learned was hitting the pause button. What does the L stand for?
The L stands for list of 10. And just briefly, I tell a story in there about an accountant or insurance salesman. I can't remember what he was, but he had a 40-year career that was totally peaceful, never got upset with anybody. And so when he retires, they decide to throw a party to celebrate a career like that. And one of the new people came up to him and said, "What's your secret? How did you have a 40-year career and never get upset with anybody?" He said, "Well, early on, I made a list of everybody's top 10 faults. Now, not everybody in the planet, but those I interact with on a regular basis. My coworkers, my bosses, my direct reports, my main customers. I made a list of their top 10 faults. And whenever they did one of those top 10 faults, I just reminded myself, you know what? They're no more perfect than I am. The good outweighs the bad. I'm going to overlook that." And the new person said, "Oh, I like that. How about if, just for fun, I real quick write down what I think the boss's top 10 faults are, compare it with your list, and see how close we get?" And the guy kind of chuckled and said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I never really wrote them down. But every time she did something that bothered me, I always said, boy, lucky for her, that's one of the 10. I see you're smiling, David. What a mindset. What a mindset that realizes everybody we deal with is a fallible human being just like we are. And we can get so upset about little things if we're not careful. But to have that list of 10 mindset is going to prevent you from losing your cool and creating a conflict. Now, please keep this in perspective. Again, in the workplace, he's not embezzling nearly as much money as he used to embezzle. Lucky for him, that's what. Stop it. That's not, or, she doesn't come to work drunk more than, I think it's down to 2 or 3 times a month. That's lucky for her. No, that's not. We're talking the little idiosyncrasies, the little quirks that we all have that if we're not careful, they can get us upset and we can create a conflict. List of 10 mentality will prevent that from happening, hopefully.
So what I hear you saying is there are places where conflict needs to be recognized. If you mentioned some of these egregious issues that are undermining health or jeopardizing the safety of other employees or the quality of the work, whatever, and you do need to not try to overlook these things. But when it comes to whether someone, the way they dress or the way they talk, or like you said, these idiosyncrasies, some things may bother us, but hey, they've got good qualities too. So they've got some of these things that I don't care for. Let's move on. Is that pretty much the message?
That's a perfect summary. Thank you. Yep.
So we've got to move on. We're talking about things that can help us not avoid conflict, but prevent it. We've talked about P, hitting the pause button. We've talked about this quote list of 10, which is really sounds like it might be a list longer than 10, but it's just our way of saying, hey, they got all these good qualities too. And they've got some issues that bother me from time to time. What's the A in the PLAY acronym?
All right, Mr. Host, if you could please tell your listeners if they've been sleeping, they need to wake up now. Because if they'll hear what I'm about to say. And by the way, this is not Ron Price's wisdom. I'm a training junkie, David. I have been to so many, look who I'm talking to, but I've been to so many seminars and workshops. I've learned from the best of the best. And I just take that material and put it in my own inimitable style, whatever. But assume good intent. I picked up somewhere along the way. Assume good intent. And David, let me put you on the spot here. I do this in workshops, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you ever hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or offended another human being when you really didn't mean to? If the answer is yes, say yes. If the answer is no, say no.
So do you want the truth, or you want me to say something that's not true?
I want you to protect your reputation. Say the truth.
Okay, of course. We have all done.
Thank you. When I do this live, I say, if that's true, raise your hand. And every hand shoots up, and I say, what took you so long? So here's my question. David, if somebody has just hurt, frustrated, disappointed, or offended you, is there at least a remote chance that maybe they didn't mean to? Maybe it was inadvertent, just like you and I have just admitted we have done. Of course, the answer is yes. But if we react, if we get all upset, we created the conflict. Not them. They did whatever they did for whatever reason, probably because they're hurting. Put you on the spot again. Finish this sentence for me. Hurting people are going to...
hurt people.
Thank you. Thank you. It's true, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it. You've seen it in your practice and in your life. So the other person is probably having a bad day, and you just happened to be there, and they took it out on you. So rather than react to the attack, I'm going to suggest you minister to the pain. And you ask yourself, whoa, that didn't feel very good. What's the best possible reason that he or she just did such an incredibly bonehead, stupid, insensitive thing? And you're going to come up with, I know his kid's been in some trouble lately, or I know her mom's been real sick. David, I'm not saying make excuses for bad behavior. I hope I would never say that. But life is hard. Should I say that again in case somebody missed it? Life is hard. And none of us are always at our best. And there's times we're going to take it out on somebody else. If we just react, we created the conflict. If we respond, we prevented it from happening. So here's one more. Let me throw in one more if I may.
Okay, go for it.
There's a guy, Ken Futch in Georgia, public speaker that I heard. If somebody says something insulting to him, or it sounds like a put down or an attack, rather than, get all defensive, he'll just very calmly say, well, that sounded like an attack. Is that how you meant it? Or, well, that sounded like an insult. Is that how you meant it? And notice the tone. He didn't say, well, that sounded like an attack. Is that how you... No, very calmly. And the person is probably going to say, you know what? No, I'm sorry. I'm frustrated by this or this. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. Please forgive me. Conflict's prevented. It never happened. Yeah?
I hear what you're saying. I think it's interesting that, like you mentioned, we tend to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We excuse our own behavior, but when it comes to someone else, it's a different story, isn't it?
It's a quote that I thought I knew who said it, David. It's one of my favorites. I don't know who said, we judge ourselves by our motives. We judge others by their actions. So our motives, we were well motivated. Maybe we messed up. But you, on the other hand, you messed up, and we never stopped to think that maybe they were well-intended, well-motivated. We judge ourselves by our motives, others by their actions. Absolutely true, sir.
And that phrase, I know we used it here in talking, taking it out on someone. But I think in the context of what you're describing, it may have come out. Sometimes taking it out, it almost seems like there is some kind of adversarial relationship. But what I hear you saying is really it just kind of comes out. You happen to be in that space at the time, and they're really, like you said, not directing ill will at you per se.
That's a great point. And finish this sentence for me, David. You ready? You always hurt
the ones you love most. And
the reason is because they're there. They're in striking distance. And as you just aptly said, if it's going to come out, it's going to come out wherever it happened to be. At the workplace, at home, at the club, wherever we happen to be. At the tribal center, wherever we happen to be. If we're in a bad mood and it's just going to come out, it's going to come out on somebody we wouldn't ordinarily want to attack in any way. Absolutely. That's a good point.
Ron, you're giving us great insights. We're talking about preventing conflict. We're going to dive into what we can do if we find ourselves in the midst of conflict. We either haven't applied these principles, or even if we have, we still find ourselves in the midst of some challenges. We'll be getting there. We do have to step away briefly. I'm talking with Ron Price. He's a conflict coach. He is also the author of the book, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. If you're just joining us, when we come back, we'll tell you more about how you can get a copy of the book or take advantage of some other things that Ron is offering to people throughout the country and throughout the world. I'm Dr. DeRose. Ron and I will be back right after this.
American Indian and Alaska Native Living will continue in a moment. If you have questions or comments about today's pre-recorded broadcast, please contact us on the web at aianl.org or call 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673.
A message from the National Police Association. It used to be that any able-bodied person would offer to assist a police officer in danger. Now, passers-by are more likely to take a video. There's a better use for your phone when an officer's in trouble. Call 911. Tell the operator where you are and what you see. Then, start your video to provide evidence later. To learn more about how you can assist law enforcement, visit nationalpolice.org. That's nationalpolice.org.
Unlike other health concerns, mental illness is not always easy to see. Depression won't show up on an eye chart, and you can't measure it on your bathroom scale. Sorting out a mental health concern is not something to attempt on your own. You won't find a bipolar disorder by looking at a thermometer. Like many other health conditions, help for mental illness takes professional diagnosis and treatment. Anxiety won't just go away under a stick-on bandage. So the sooner you seek treatment, the better. If you or a loved one has a mental health concern, don't go it alone. Find out what to do. For 24-hour free and confidential information and treatment referral, call 1-800-662-HELP. Learn more at samhsa.gov/support. That's samhsa.gov/support.
Using meth taught me everything about freedom, only not like you think. It taught me how easy it is to lose your freedom. If you think meth is taking control of you, ask for help. You have the power to be truly free. I know. I'm Jan, and I'm free from meth.
If you or someone you know is struggling with meth, call 1-800-662-HELP for 24-hour free and confidential treatment referral. Learn more at samhsa.gov/meth.
You're listening to Dr. David DeRose on American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Your comments and questions are welcome. Call now at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. Here again is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome back to our second half of today's edition of American Indian and Alaska Native Living. I'm Dr. David DeRose, my guest Ron Price. He's the author of the book Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. We're learning principles that not only apply in the workplace, but they apply everywhere in the home, in tribal settings. I know Ron's got some other things that look at some special circumstances and other domains of life, but Play Nice is all about both helping us to manage conflict, prevent conflict. Ron, we've been walking through this mnemonic play. We've talked about pressing the pause button. We've talked about keeping a list of 10 things that we're willing to overlook about people. Then we got into the letter A, and I've tried to cultivate this practice of attributing the most gracious motives to people. You use that letter A a little bit differently. How did you put it for A?
Assume good intent.
Assume good intent.
And I know we're taught not to assume, but this one I give you grace. You can do it. It's good to assume. Hey, David, before we go further, you're using a word
mnemonic.
It almost sounded like demonic, but
no, mnemonic. MNEMONIC, I believe is the correct spelling.
And is that the same as an acronym that one letter stands for something?
So an acronym is something, you're right, like we're play. Each letter stands for, a word or a phrase, but a mnemonic is a memory device.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so the MNEMONIC. Yeah, it does kind of sound like demonic, doesn't it? Mnemonic.
That's why I wanted to point it out. I thought I was hearing correctly, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, here's the dictionary definition. A mnemonic device or memory device is any learning technique that aids information retention or retrieval in the human memory, often by associating the information with something that is easier to remember.
Okay.
So
okay,
it's a little bit different, but it's it's trying to keep in our mind these important principles.
Right.
So we're glad that you're doing that. So we're on to why in play, and these are the things that help us to prevent conflict. What is the why? What does that stand for?
It stands for yield to understand others. David, let me tell you something I know about you. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, but you want to be understood by the important people in your life. True or false?
I'd go a step beyond that, and I'd say even people that might feel that they're unimportant in my life, I want them to understand me.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Well, guess what? The important people in your life want to be understood by you. True or false? And so many conflicts occur because more than two or more people are each trying to be understood at the same time. So they're both talking. David, if both are talking, who's listening?
Sounds like nobody.
Thank you. And if nobody's listening, who's understanding? And again, the answer is nobody. So I love the Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. You have a right to be understood. It's a drive. It's a need. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you know the other person has that same need and same drive, why not let them go first? Why not truly listen to them, understand them, and then by doing so, hopefully they'll return the favor, and it's your turn to be understood by them. So many conflicts, David, occur because of misunderstandings. Oh, you were upset about that? I thought you were upset about that. Oh, well, okay, no big deal. Conflict's prevented. It goes away. It never happened. So yield to understand others. You have a right to be understood. Just wait your turn. Come on, play nice in the sandbox. Wait your turn.
When he's done with the truck, then you can play with it, right?
That's exactly. There you go. Now we're talking.
Okay. So we've spent a lot of time speaking about preventing conflict, but a lot of us find ourselves in the midst of conflict, and we need some strategies for that as well. So we've walked through the play, and now we're getting into the NICE. What does NICE stand for? First, give us the overview, NICE.
Negotiate with, not against the other. Focus on interests and concerns. The I is interest. Communicate for mutual benefit, and explore options. Get out of the box.
Okay. So help us break this down. So someone's listening today, they're just in a contentious setting, hopefully not in a tribal council meeting, tribal health department. Let's put it in some other setting, just a grocery store. Maybe someone didn't understand where they were coming from, not in our home. You just ran into someone in a situation. It seems like conflict has just arisen. Probably could have been prevented, we've been learning, but what do you do when you're in the midst of conflict, wherever it is?
All right, so the N, let's start there, is negotiate with, not against the other person. David, when we're in a conflict with someone, it is so easy, and it's natural, in fact, to look at the other person as the problem, as the enemy, as the opponent, as adversary, whatever words you want to use in that negative fashion. It's me against them against me. Well, if you're looking at them as the enemy, then, boy, you better get defensive. You better protect yourself because, by definition, they're out to get you. But what if you could train yourself to look at them in a different light, at least until proven otherwise? Look at them as an ally who wants to get this situation resolved every bit as much as you do. They're a human being with strengths, weaknesses, everything in between. You have a situation that is the enemy, not another person who is the enemy. David, it's going to impact how you speak to them, your body language, how you interact with them, because you can't hide the fact. If I'm all bitter and upset with you, I can't hide that. It's going to come out, which is going to put you on the defensive and perhaps on the attack, and the conflict is not going to get resolved. So again, look at them as an ally, somebody you want to work with, not against, to hopefully resolve whatever has come between you.
So practically, what does that look like? I know you've given, in this edition of the book that I'm looking at, it's called the Toolbox Edition. You've got all kinds of practical strategies in the book, not only in the chapters, but you've got this additional material. Can you help illustrate this a little bit? What can I do to help negotiate with someone and not against them?
Well, again, the push the pause button that we talked about in the prevent can help that. Before you go to interact with this other person, make sure you choose the attitude, the standards that you want to conduct yourself by. Whether they do or not is not the issue. You are going to maintain a peaceful, calm environment. Need to be ready to call a timeout, which, by the way, we might want to save that for the next segment because that's huge, and I don't want to shortchange that one. Call a timeout the correct way. But again, I had these two neighbors, David. They were in and out of court, in and out of court, in and out of court for 4 years over barking dogs, honking horns, throwing trash, cutting vines. It didn't matter. One would do something, the other would take them to court. And it seems whoever lost in that battle would look for an opportunity to get back to court so they could win the next time.
Interesting.
I sat down with them, David, and after 2 sessions, I got them to stop looking at each other as the enemy, look at the situation as the enemy, and they signed an agreement that said, hey, I'm not going to mess with you anymore. Please don't mess with me. And that stopped the whole thing in its tracks. They stopped looking at each other. Oh, I got to get back at that guy, or oh, I got to treat him. No, he's my neighbor. I don't have a conflict with him. And they started acting that way. And they resolved their differences. And the court system was mighty glad for that, I'll promise you.
I can imagine. Let's talk about this letter I. Remind us again, what does that stand for in the word nice?
It's focus on interests, not positions. I think I got to look it up now. See, now that you put me on the spot, I got to look it up to make sure. Identify, that's what it is. Identify.
Okay, because you got 3 different books that all use the same. Yeah, we got to keep you on the right book.
That's right. Thank you.
In this book, the I stands for what? Identify?
Identify key underlying interests and concerns. That's what it is. Okay. Identify key underlying interests and concerns. And this is another one of those wake up. If you've been sleeping, wake up. Tell you a quick story. I got asked to go to a local nonprofit in my area. And in fact, I can tell the story because I have their permission. Salmon Ruins is ancient Native American village where they lived, and the kivas and all the rest. It's a fascinating place to visit. But they had a problem. They had a manager and a key employee who were in a dispute over money. The key employee wanted a raise. The manager kept saying no. And this has been going on for months. I want a raise. No, I want a raise. No, I want a raise. No. Finally, they called me and asked if I'd step in and help them mediate, resolve their situation. And David, early on, I didn't have to do much of the end part. They respected each other. They had a professional relationship, but I focused on the key underlying interests and concerns. And early on, I turned to the key employee and I asked her a very stupid question, I think. I said, why do you want a raise? Why do you want a raise? Now, anybody who's gainfully employed that would not like to be paid more money for the work that they're doing, come on, why do you want a raise? But this is what she said. She had been working at that establishment significantly longer than most of her coworkers. She had more experience in the fields of anthropology and archaeology, having worked other places before she came to Salmon Ruins. She had more education in the fields of anthropology and archaeology that they deal with on a regular basis. But she was not being paid much more than her coworkers. And she didn't think that was fair. And again, in a live seminar, I always ask, anybody want to argue with you? Don't we have an economy where if you have more time on the job, more experience, more education, you should be compensated higher than somebody who's just starting out? So the manager, bless his heart, he says, you know what? I hear you. Now, had she tried to tell him this before and just didn't tell him the right way? I don't know. Did she tell him the right way and he just didn't hear her? I don't know. He heard her that day. And this is what he said to her. I understand where you're coming from, but I still can't give you a raise.
And why was that? Why was he saying he couldn't give a raise?
Because the money wasn't in the budget.
Okay, fair enough.
So here's what he said I can do. He said, I can reduce your work week by 5 hours and still pay you the same amount of money. David, did she get a raise, an hourly raise?
Definitely. Hourly.
Yeah, we'd have to do the arithmetic. How much was she making? Divide by 40, then divide by... But it gave her that gap. It gave her that recognition. It gave her that prestige that she was a more valuable employee than her coworkers. And David, that's what she was after all along. It was never about the money. But she didn't know how to say that other than saying, I want a raise. Identify the key issues. Don't tell me I want this. Why do you want that? What would that do for you? Because maybe there's a way I can give you that other than in the way you're asking. This one's huge, David. So many conflicts could be resolved if we really get to the nut of what it's about.
I mean, this is tremendous. You're giving us a lot of practical information. I did promise that we tell people how they can contact you. I said we'd do it at the top of this segment, but here we are about to slip away for another break. But Ron, how does someone track you down?
RonPrice.com, ron@ronprice.com. If I've struck a nerve and you want to have a discussion, I won't give you all day, but I'll spend time with you. ron@ronprice.com.
Very good. ron@ronprice.com is going to stay by. I encourage you to do the same. We've got a final segment coming up. Dr. David DeRose with Ron Price. More right after these important messages.
Today's broadcast has been pre-recorded. However, if you have questions about today's show or would like further information, please call 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. We'll be right back after this.
If a natural disaster comes knocking, how prepared is your family? You can't just close the door on earthquakes, floods, or hurricanes and hope they go away. That's why it's important to make a plan now. Ready.gov/plan has the tools and tips you need to prepare your family for an emergency. So if disaster shows up at your doorstep, you'll be ready. Visit ready.gov/plan and make a plan today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
I'm just texting him back. I'm just posting a story. I'm just changing the song.
No. When it comes to distracted driving, just don't. Sending a text takes your eyes off the road for just 5 seconds, but in that time, your car can travel the length of an entire football field. Any distracted driving just isn't worth it.
Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
What is a number story?
My number story started with fear and a lack of support, and it has led me to be there for others.
A number story begins in our childhood with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
My number story begins with the separation from my father and the emotional abandonment from my mother, and leads to me being a role model to not only myself, but those around me by becoming the person that wasn't there for me.
ACEs are so common, 2/3 of us have one.
My number story begins with drug abuse and homelessness, and leads to realizing that I can live life by my own standards.
A study found the more ACEs, the more likely we may experience a host of serious health effects, physical and mental, but that doesn't need to be the case. Your ACE number is simply an entry point to your own story. Where it leads is up to you.
My number story begins with years of emotional abuse and leads to peace, clarity, and security in my self-worth.
Take control of where your number story leads at numberstory.org.
You're listening to Dr. David DeRose on American Indian and Alaska Native Living. Your comments and questions are welcome. Call now at 1-800-775-HOPE. That's 1-800-775-4673. Here again is Dr. DeRose.
Welcome back to our final segment of today's edition of American Indian and Alaska Native Living. I'm Dr. David DeRose. Ron Price has been my guest from the top of the hour, and he has stayed by for this final segment. We've been speaking about both preventing conflict and then managing conflict once we find ourselves in the midst of it. We've been walking through a mnemonic dealing with the latter, conflict management. We've talked about N and I in the word nice. Ron, what about the letters C and E in the word nice? What do those stand for?
We're on to the C, David. Cooperate for mutual benefit. Cooperate for mutual benefit. If you walk away from a situation thinking I won and they lost, you know what? You probably haven't won anything. The neighbors that we talked about in the last segment. One came out of court saying I won. He was happy. The other came out not happy at all. And that's why I kept going. The loser wanted revenge. So cooperate for mutual benefit. Don't settle for anything less than win-win. Don't get hung up on 50-50. That's an arbitrary number. Can each party walk away from the deal satisfied? You know what? It's resolved. I'm good with it. That's what you got to strive for. And to get there, the E is explore options. You know, you're in the midst of a conflict. Maybe right then you don't see a resolution. Okay, you don't see one. Reach out to a conflict coach. By the way, this might be a good time to tell people that I'm on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube as Ron Price Conflict Coach. If I can help, I want to help. And again, I've had years of experience learning how to help people prevent or resolve conflict. So Ron Price Conflict Coach. But there are options. Just because you don't see them right at the moment doesn't mean they're not there at all. If you're looking for the resolution, you're much more likely to find it.
Now, you mentioned this concept of cooperation, and you shared an interesting insight in the book about a famous automobile executive and his approach to dealing with people. And it struck me because so many times you'll hear people behind the scenes talking about the shrewd deal they made and, you know, how they pulled the wool over someone's eyes and how they got this steal of a deal, things like that. But tell us a little bit about this different perspective and someone who's often regarded as a very skilled leader.
Yeah. You're talking about Lee Iacocca. And when I do this in live workshops, I ask people to describe Lee Iacocca for me. And they'll say, oh, invented the Mustang, turned Chrysler around. He's the one that took over the Statue of Liberty renovation project. This was a driven, powerful, intelligent. You'd think, I'm going to get what I want, and if you're in my way, you're going to get run over. That's not who he was. He said in his autobiography that he never entered into any agreement that he didn't honestly feel was also good for the other side. Wow. And again, that surprised me, as I'm thinking it surprised you at first. But why would he do that? Why would he have a mindset? Why would he care about the other side and not just focus on what he needed or wanted? You want to take that answer, or should I go for it, David? Why would he think that?
Well, you know, you're on such a roll, Ron. I think we should leave it in your court.
All right. Because he was wise enough to know that if he's dealing with a union, for instance, and he leaves that table thinking, oh, man, I hope they never find out what just happened, they're probably gonna. And he's always got to be watching his backside, because who's going to come up and say, hey, wait a minute, or a vendor, whatever. If he walked away knowing that he had taken advantage, whatever, he couldn't have peace. He couldn't have contentment, because he'd have to always worry. If in the positive, he could walk away thinking, you know what? I got enough of what I need to be satisfied, and they got enough of what they need to be satisfied. There's no reason for them to come back later and say, hey, wait a minute. So it's got to be a win-win proposition, or it's not fully resolved. It's going to come back later and often be uglier than if you had resolved it the first time.
Now, you make a great case throughout your books about the importance of dialogue, communication, and yet you also talk about settings where you might not be in the best position to dialogue right at that moment. Help walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, David, you know this better than I do, so please step in, and I mean this if I use my terms wrong. But we have a part of the brain right in the forehead called the frontal lobe. I believe it's also called the prefrontal cortex. Are they the same, by the way?
We'll run with that for the show. Yeah.
Okay. All right. For the layman,
yeah, we'll run
they're
with
the
that.
same.
Yeah.
All right. But it's the functional thought process part of the brain. It's the command center where we do reason and rationale and thought, and all that takes place in the frontal lobe. Am I still accurate? Can I keep going?
We're good.
All right.
Yeah, you're on a roll.
We also have the deep limbic system, or the amygdala, which is the seat of emotions. If we're happy, we're sad, we're frustrated, we're excited, that's the part of the brain that's in operation. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mind, but
No, we're good. Emotional brain, rational brain. That
all
works.
right.
That works.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if you and I are in our rational brains, we can probably have a rational conversation. Hello. If one or both of us, David, get into that emotional brain, the chances of us having a rational conversation are slim to none. And so if we recognize that one or both of us are not in the literally right frame of mind to have a productive conversation, then we got to stop it. We got to stop it. And the way to do it is to call a timeout. But you got to call a timeout the wrong way. Let me tell you the wrong way first, and then we'll get to the right way.
Okay.
The wrong way, and this happens so often, two people are having a conversation, and one will just reach their level of frustration, throw their hands up in the air and say, you know what, time out, and they'll storm out. That's the wrong way to do it. Now, did the argument cease? Yes. But you've left the other person, well, wait a minute. Are we ever going to talk about this? Are you rejecting me? Are you rejecting our friendship or whatever our relationship is? Are you quitting the job? Are you leaving the home? They don't know. So if they care about you, they've got to come after you, which is going to further infuriate you and make you want to walk all the further and faster. David, here's all they got to do. Here's all you got to do. It's so simple. You know what? I am too upset to talk right now. Give me an hour. I'll be back in an hour and we'll talk then. Or you know what? How about if we go grab a cup of tea at 3:00? Decaffeinated, by the way. How about if we go, I've been reading your book. How about if we go get a cup of caffeine-free tea at 3:00 and we'll talk about it then? And by the way, that's another tip too. If you're in a dispute with somebody and you want to have a productive conversation, have it at a public place. Have it at a public place. You're going to keep your voices down. You're not going to blow up. You don't want to embarrass yourself. Make sure nobody's listening. But that's a good tip as well. But come back when you're both more rational. The emotions have subsided and you can talk to and with each other, not at each other. If you're in that emotional brain, the conversation could get ugly beyond measure, and it could be a relationship-killing conversation. Don't do it. Call a timeout the correct way. Say, I need a timeout, or we need a timeout. David, by the way, what should you never say to another adult?
There's plenty of things you should never say to another adult.
But in this regard, you need a timeout.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
You'll find out how much they do. So, yeah, if you call a timeout the right way, so many conflicts could be prevented and conversations could be productive.
Ron, you've got such a wealth of experience. You've done such a great job of sharing so many insights with us. And if we had 2 or 3 shows, we could continue to talk about a lot. I've taken notes in the book. I've been through the entire book. And by the way, some folks are better readers than others. This is an easy read. It's a pretty comprehensive book. I mean, it's got a lot of pages, but it goes by quickly. There's a lot of quotes and white space in the book, so it's not a difficult read. But we've been talking about Play Nice in your Sandbox at work, the Toolbox edition. How does someone pick up a copy of the book, Ron, if they want to engage with the book?
Yeah, they can go to Amazon, Amazon.com. It's available there. Or if you want, I can send it out to them at a discount. I'm hoping I don't get millions and millions, although maybe I do. Maybe that would be good. Make the post office happy. But Amazon is probably the best way. Now, I also have a course that I call Porcupine Skunks Customers and Coworkers. That's a video course that people can watch with their work teams, their family teams, any group, real low-key. And again, just brief nuggets like we've been sharing today that are going to help people prevent, resolve conflict, deal with difficult people, things of that nature.
So tell us a little bit more about this course. How does someone tap into it? Is it on demand? Do they go through with a group? How does it work?
There's some information, but it's not totally accurate at my website. I got to fix that. But Ron at ronprice.com, let's have a dialogue. I'll be happy to tell anybody individually more. But again, I go through, how do you deal with difficult people, difficult situations? Keep your cool when other people around you are losing theirs. I've got a great story about grab your thumb to stay rational and so forth. Get in touch. Let's talk.
Ron, thank you so much. I'm going to drop by ronprice.com. I encourage my listeners, ronprice.com, or just remember, Ron Price, Conflict Coach, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Anything else, Ron?
Yeah, just that I'm posting regularly at TikTok and the different social media. Ron Price Conflict Coach. Ron Price Conflict Coach.
Okay, we do have to run. Ron, thank you so very much for sharing your expertise.
David, it's been great. Thank you so much.
And to each one of you listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, I'm Dr. David DeRose, wishing you the very best of health.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.